All right, everybody, welcome back to the Tomahawk. We got a special show today. It's our first interview. We've got Jake Hahn on the show, got Matt and Justin as always, and we're going to talk some hockey. Jake, how you doing, man?
Doing great, boys. Glad to be on with you. Excited to talk a little hockey and break it down with the Chicago Blackhawks. Maybe we could look ahead to the playoffs a little bit as well. So hope all three of you boys are doing well.
Yeah. If the Hawks were in playoff contention, we'd be doing much better. A little return to the glory days, but apparently that's not in the cards this year. So the Hawks have been somewhat of a mixed bag this year. People don't know, or at least we don't know who they are as an identity. They were supposed to come in as a team that was rebuilding. They're supposed to be in the drudges of the Central Division. Actually, a lot of people weren't think the Central Division was going to be much, and they turned into be Titans. And everybody is kind of fighting for their lives a bit. But the Hawks surprised a lot of people at the beginning. There was some, we believe some goalie controversy, because originally we believed that Delia and Subban were supposed to be the initial grouping. Lankinen came in and he completely threw that plan to the side. And we've had some guys that have come up like Brandon Hagel, Pius Suter, who needs some, obviously needs a little bit of seasoning and some disappointment. Well, namely, I would say Zadorov or Zadorov. Sorry, guys. and Boquist. What are, your personal feelings, or what have you seen from the Hawks this year, kind of from the outside and looking in?
Yeah, I think if you look at it from after those first 3 weeks of the season, it's maybe a bit disappointing, because you got a little bit excited and there were some great stories. Not to say there still isn't some great stories to take away from the season for the Blackhawks, but I think you thought, okay, maybe the fourth spot, the playoff spot, is there up for grabs. And even at that point, Florida wasn't really going yet, so there was maybe a couple spots that you thought you could get. Most of us were putting in ink that it was going to be Carolina and Tampa Bay locking down at least two of those spots. So I think it's a bit disappointing the way that the second half of the season went. But ultimately, I think you could take away a lot of positives. And, you mentioned it there, Michael, about the Titans in this division. And they really are Titans. I mean, we did power rankings on our show recently, and we had three of these teams in the top five. I'm still maybe unsure about Florida long term. Maybe they're just having a good season. But to me, Carolina and Tampa Bay are two of the best teams in the entire league. I had Carolina at 1 in my power rankings. I think that highly of them. So you're going up against these teams on a nightly basis. I think that's a tough measuring stick for a team like Chicago that's trying to build this thing back up. So I don't know if you want to read too much into it. And I think it's good experience for some of these younger guys. And you can maybe take away the fact that you found a goaltender to get excited about, right? You mentioned Delia and Subban being the combo going into this season. The emergence of Kevin Lankinen, if he continues to get better, maybe you found your number one goaltender of the future, or at least somebody that could be a part of a tandem. So there's some positives to take out of this season, but I would have liked to see the good vibes continue like we saw the first couple of weeks, because it was a lot of fun that start of the year. I'm sure you guys were loving it.
We were, man. We were. It was. Yeah. We think that a lot of the young guys. I mean, I think they have 7 or 8 rookies who have scored their first goal in the NHL this year. And I think as the season went on, I think that they might have gotten a little burned out. I mean, this is the first time a lot of these guys have played this much hockey before. Normally, maybe they play on a Saturday or so, but now they're playing 2 or 3 games a week. And especially with some of the schedules changing, like they had to reschedule a Carolina game before. And I think that actually happened to Lankinen as well. He was playing quite a bit, and I think he might have gotten burned out. Where do you see the Lankinen in comparative to other goalies in the NHL?
Yeah, it's tough to gauge, right? Because we have such a small sample size on Lankinen, and when you really look at it, and we just talked about how difficult a few of these teams are in this division, I don't know how much I want to read into games against Tampa Bay and Carolina and some of these top teams, although it's good experience for him, I think, moving forward, and maybe once he gets to lesser competition, it'll feel easier playing against those teams. Yeah. He doesn't have to go up against these beasts in this division.
Yeah, just twice.
I mean, the numbers faded. If you look at the numbers right now compared to what it was at the start of the season, they dipped quite a bit, because he was putting up some crazy numbers at the start of the year. And I don't know if any of us, even the biggest Blackhawks fans like you guys, expected those numbers to to keep up for the entire year. So they dipped down. I still think overall it's been a great year for him. And if you're looking at it, you're trying to compare him with other goaltenders around the NHL. I'm not ready to lock him in as a legit number one goaltender in the league right now, but if he goes out, has another good season next year, and he's working on a really, really cheap deal, I think the Blackhawks have no problem bringing him back and giving him some starts. Then I think maybe you got something there. So I still need to see it for another year with him, but it's very promising what we saw for the most part this year.
Do you think we need an experienced backup, Jake?
Yes, I do. I think that would help a lot because it would just stabilize things a little bit, right? To have that older veteran to go back to. And there's plenty of them out there. I mean, it's not hard to find sort of that older veteran goaltender that you can sign for $1 million, $1.5 million, just throw on your roster. I think it's good to have it. There's a lot of inexperience between the pipes right now for the Blackhawks. We just talked about Lankinen that emerged this year. Malcolm Subban's another sort of unproven goaltender. He's had a bit more time in the NHL than Lankinen. And Cullen Delia was somebody that was kind of a minor leaguer, right? So there's just not a lot of stability there in terms of that veteran goaltender. And I would love to see somebody, like a Corey Crawford, who was there for so long. Obviously not somebody of that ability. Corey Crawford, one of the better goaltenders of his time. But somebody like that, a veteran that's maybe towards the end of their career to come in and stabilize things. I think that would be good for the Hawks.
I agree.
Jake, what do you see like their defensive core, right? Like, so Duncan Keith's getting older. He's not getting any younger. Connor Murphy, I'm still hit or miss on. Kelvin DeHaan, I know I keep reading that the Kraken might take him in the expansion draft. Like, what would you ideally, if you were running the defense, what would you like to see them do going forward? Like, do we keep pushing Ian Mitchell and Wyatt Kalynuk, who they just picked up this year, and Riley Stillman, I know they gave an extension to? Like, what would you like to see in terms of their defense? How could they improve that?
Well, yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's key too because there's a lot of fun forwards up front. I think there's some talent up front for Chicago to get excited about. We talked about Lankinen and the possibility of there being something there. I look at the blue line and it's extremely thin. I mean, it's no surprise that they're giving up a bunch of high danger chances to these top teams. I would stress patience with the blue line. I think that's the word I would use the most. And you mentioned a guy like Ian Mitchell, who's still very young, Adam Boquist, who's still extremely young as well. These guys need time to develop. I mean, it's not easy to step into the league and play on the blue line and play against these veteran players that have been doing it for so long. I think it's the most difficult position to step into the league. Even if you're a first overall pick, like a guy like Rasmus Dahlin in Buffalo, he's needed a couple years to kind of really find himself. And even now, he's still maybe not where he needs to be. So I think when you're looking at young defensemen, it's just good to get them the experience, continue to stay patient with them. I would maybe like to see them shore up the blue line a bit next year, protect these kids maybe a bit more by bringing in some veterans. I understand Duncan Keith's back there, and he's kind of the ultimate veteran right now. But his plays obviously deteriorated a little bit in recent years. So I'd maybe like to see a couple more of those veteran guys back there next season, and possibly that's something that they could address in the offseason. But as for the young guys, I think that's the future, and you just want to stay patient and get these guys as many important minutes as possible.
For sure. Okay.
Obviously, development is key, and one of the things with developing players is communication. And I think we're at a time right now where we have some coaches that are really old school and believe in these old school tactics, and we have some other coaches that are more new school and they treat the players much differently. We're looking at a time now where back in the day, players, they would do their interview, they would go out and drink beer, have a great time. Who knows what they did? Nowadays, everybody is, they have their cell phones out and
camera ready. Yep.
Yeah, and they want to get into and talk about issues that are important to them, and coaches need to figure out a way to communicate with them. Do you think that the head coach now plays more of a role in communicating with young players, making them feel heard, and in doing that, bring their development to a higher level than, say, some other coaches?
Yeah, well, I do think the mental part of the game is so key as well, right? And I don't know if that necessarily falls on the coach, but it can fall on the coach. I mean, the coach can take that into his own hands, or other coaches on the team can really help players through that, because it's not easy learning how to be a professional. And especially as a young player in this league, there's a lot of distractions out there, especially nowadays, even more so than maybe 10, 15 years ago. So there's a lot going on for some of these kids. You get a lot of money early, and, it can be difficult to sort of handle it. So I think the mental side of the game is really, really key. And like I said, just sort of learning to just be a professional in the league and show up every single night and every single day at practice and be at your best. So yeah, I do think that that's something that can certainly fall on the coach. Tough to really quantify and put into words, but I do think that that's something that's extremely important this day and age in the NHL.
Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I had a question about, it was just on my tongue and I just couldn't say it.
I know you were talking about being the GM, right, Matt?
Yeah, I guess I can go there. I'll say Stan Bowman gets fired today and Jake Hahn gets hired.
You get the call.
Oh,
Who are we keeping?
Right.
Who are we unloading? Who are we drafting? Like what types of players? Because I think Bowman, we were talking in our last podcast, he doesn't really keep too many of his first round picks. I think we only have 2. So he doesn't seem to have like a good plan with these guys. It seems
I think it's
like
Doc and Boquist are the only 2 that are on the roster, right?
And I have a feeling Boquist won't last long. I just feel like that he's been given a lot of chances, but like you said, he's young and you got to protect him and stuff. But I just don't see him fitting in on this team.
well, first of all, if I'm taking over for Stan, how much am I getting paid here? We got to talk dollars and cents.
It's Chicago. You're gonna get a 5-year deal, and then you're gonna get fired after a year.
All the Giordano's you can eat. You know.
Yeah.
Perfect.
If you do bad, they'll promote you to president probably.
Yeah.
Okay, great. This sounds like a great job for me. I'm perfect for this role. Yeah, and I get paid in American money too. That's like 100 times money up here. But no, to answer your question, I think it's a really intriguing roster for a few different reasons. And we kind of went over the blue line, some of the youth back there. There are some exciting forwards I think that we can look forward to. You guys mentioned Kirby Dach, and I don't think we've really got to see the best of him this year. He unfortunately got hurt at the World Juniors playing for my team Canada, and I was really sad to see that because I was very excited to watch him start the season with Chicago and really be a part of that thing. So he gets off to the late start. I think you can almost draw a line through the season for a guy like Kirby Dach, but I'm really excited about his future. I think he's somebody that you can maybe not build around as a focal point, but be a really nice piece amongst a few other big pieces for Chicago to really turn this thing around. I'm really just intrigued about some of the veterans on this team and what to do, with a guy like Duncan Keith on the back end, who's still got a couple more years left on his deal, and even Patrick Kane. I mean, Patrick Kane's one of the best hockey players in the world. He's probably the best American-born player ever. Does he stick around for this? How do you figure something out there? Like, have you guys ever really thought about that and the fact that maybe, obviously he's a great player. No one's disputing his talent, but if you wanted to ever move him and get some sort of big package back, that could be something that really does well for Chicago in the future. I know it's probably crazy to say in Chicago.
The city would riot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it would be weird to see him wear any other jersey other than a Blackhawk.
It'd be a Buffalo jersy.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah. There you go.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
At that point,
who knows,
at that point, if he had like 20 points for the year, then it would be for sure that Buffalo is a curse to players, and nobody should ever sign there again.
So if I'm the GM and I trade Patrick Kane, am I getting run out of town? Is that what's happening?
You better bring something good back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. With the expansion draft coming up, Jake, like who, if not to ask another GM question, but if you're Ron Francis up in Seattle, you get to Chicago in the expansion draft, is there anybody in particular that you would kind of stand out? Obviously, I know there's tons of stipulations with who's protected and who's not, but is there any diamonds in the rough that you think Seattle might take? I mean, we've heard rumors.
Please.
Matt is all on board with the please get rid of Dylan Strome. I think his -5 the other night.
I'm done.
He sounds like he'll drive him to Seattle.
Yeah.
I just pretty much came back from there.
Who could you realistically see? Who do you think Seattle might take in a perfect situation? I mean, could they go for somebody like Strome? Or I mean, I know there's some Hahn is the one that keeps getting rumored. Could they go with someone else? I mean, what do you think, big picture, who do you think they might lose in the expansion draft this year?
Yeah, well, I do think the Blackhawks, compared to maybe some other teams around the league, are in a pretty good spot for the expansion draft. I don't think they're going to lose a huge piece. We saw in the last expansion draft for Vegas, there was a couple teams that just had such a tough spot, right? Like you knew you were going to lose a really good defenseman. You knew you were going to lose a really good forward. And Vegas obviously played it really well, and we saw the instant success. Yeah, they really killed it. And I wasn't expecting it at all. I had no expectations for them going into that year, and it really was quite the story. I don't expect the same thing to happen with Seattle. Maybe they do shock us again and they go on a nice run in that first year, but the bar was set way too high for the Vegas Golden Knights. When I look at Chicago's roster and I look at the options, you mentioned Hahn, you mentioned Dylan Strome as well. I think that's probably about as bad as it's going to get in terms of a player that you're going to lose here. I mean, if you lose Hahn, I think that's kind of a difficult blow, but it's not something that you won't recover from. And same with Dylan Strome. I mean, Matt's saying that he's going to drive him over to Seattle, so I don't think people are going to be too upset about that one. But when I look at them and I compare them to some other teams that for sure are going to lose a top 4 defenseman or maybe a top 6 forward, I think Chicago's in a pretty good spot heading to the expansion draft.
Definitely. Okay.
Moving on to the NHL. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is what's been going on in New York, the rumble in the jungle, and Washington. Okay, it started off with, Wilson and him going berserk and throwing Panarin around like a rag doll, and a lot of people.
Boy.
Yeah, a lot of people felt that that it was overboard and he should have been fined. And then yesterday, right from the drop of the puck, we got 3 fights. And then after that, the Rangers, they make a statement about they feel that George Peros cannot do a good job in in his role, and they get a $250,000 fine today from the league.
Just words.
So
that was the fine.
so two questions here. One, what do you think of the whole situation? And number 2, how do you think the owners feel about what happened to the Rangers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here with what happened this week between these two teams, and obviously more centering around the New York Rangers. Look, I love physical hockey. I love the odd fight. I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not somebody that wants fighting out of the game, but I don't tune in to the game to watch fights. I tune in to watch skill. I tune in to watch hockey. If 2 grown men want to drop the gloves and both combatants are willing, I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that. These are grown adults and they can make their own decisions. My only problem is when someone goes after someone and they don't want any part of it. And that's what we saw Tom Wilson do a few nights ago to Pavel Buchnevich. I mean, he's vulnerable. He's on the ground. He gives them the rabbit punch. You don't need to be going after a skill player like that if you're a guy like Tom Wilson. And then Panarin comes in, and good for Panarin coming in and defending a teammate like that. And he knows full well whose back he's jumping on. It's Tom Wilson. He knows there's going to be a reaction from Tom Wilson. I don't think Panarin's surprised at the reaction from Wilson. And he grabs his hair. It was an extremely dirty play by Tom Wilson. There's really no doubt about it. And when I watched it, and I had it on live at a few games on at the same time, I was so fearful for Panarin right away because watching it live, I thought that his head hit the ice. Now, when you slow it down, it looks like he got really lucky and his head didn't hit the ice. And the same thing happened to me, actually, when I was playing hockey when I was in high school. I picked a fight with a much bigger guy. Helmet was off, and I got thrown to the ice, and my head smacked on the ice, and I had a concussion for like 2 months. Wow. So I know exactly what Panarin could have happened to Panarin. Luckily, it didn't, and I'm glad he's relatively okay. I know they're calling it a lower body injury with him. I think they're just taking precautions.
Be safe,
there's no need to play him these last few games of the season. So I didn't like that. I didn't like that from Tom Wilson. I thought that was kind of cowardly to go after star players like that. But I did think that the statement from the New York Rangers was maybe a little bit too much. I didn't think you needed to go public with that and the way that they worded it. I just thought it was a bit much from the New York Rangers. That's something you can maybe do in private. You could send to the league. You could send to George Peros and player safety. I don't think that needed to be done in public, and they paid a steep fine for it, obviously. And then what we saw in response between the Rangers and the Capitals. I don't know about you guys and what you like when you turn on a hockey game. It's hard not to get fired up watching that. I mean, guys dropping the mitts and filling up the penalty box. It's the kind of old school hockey that I can't I can't help but enjoy just a little bit. You can't help but be entertained by that. Do I need to see it all game? Probably not, but it was pretty entertaining. When you watch a lot of regular season games like I do, and it can kind of drag on, and especially this year with the same teams playing each other every single night, it was nice to spice it up a little bit and have something to get excited about. So it was a crazy week, and hopefully the dust is all settled. But ultimately, I don't agree with what Tom Wilson did. I think if he wants to go after players, go after someone who's ready and a willing combatant. I don't think you need to be going after a down player or someone like Artemi Panarin. The instant that he turns around and he sees it's Panarin, I think that if you want to talk about but I think if you want to talk about a code in hockey, and people throw that word around all the time, when you see it's Panarin, I think you need to almost push away and say, hey, buddy, like, I get you're sticking up for your teammate. I'm not going to go after you. I think a lot of the old school players would have done that. You turn around and you see Gretzky grabbing you or something. You're not going to throw him onto the ground. So
you're probably going to laugh.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Like, oh, hey, buddy.
McSorley would probably be coming for you off of the bench.
And the Rangers don't have that. And I do think that I know a lot of
they got rid of the
players,
guy.
And older players are bringing that up, but and some people might call them dinosaurs for the fact that they think that you need to have these tough guys. But I think you need to have at least some sort of toughness. Like, it doesn't have to be a guy that goes out there and plays 3 minutes and just punches people in the face. But I think you got to have somebody with a little bit of grit. You got to have some kind of identity like that, or teams are just going to push you around. And when I look at the Caps, they're a really tough team. They're a team full of guys like Wilson who are kind of bullies, right? And the Rangers just aren't built that way. And I think we kind of saw that take place a few nights ago.
It's crazy.
Do you think they're regretting getting rid of Brandon Lemieux to LA? I think he would have that next game. He would have been the man out there just starting all the trouble.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the type of guy, too, that he can play. I mean, he's not just...
exactly.
Yeah, he can go play on your fourth line, even your third line. You could even bump him up in the lineup if you want to. And it's not like a waste of a roster spot. He can give you a good, 10, 11 minutes. He might even be able to provide some offense. And he does have that grit. So I think it's something that you need on your team, not even for a situation like this with Panarin, but if you want to go on a deep playoff run, I think you're going to need that, especially in that division, which will be the Metropolitan Division when we get back to normal next year. Right. There's some pretty tough physical teams in there, and Washington's the first one that comes to mind. You're probably going to have to go through the Caps, and you need some kind of physicality. So that is something I think the Rangers probably need to address.
It's pretty incredible because I'm not a Tom Wilson fan by any means, but he is probably like the prototypical, well, I would say like maybe the millennial goon that, to describe him, because he is skilled, he has speed, he can pass, he could shoot, but he also hits and he fights. And there's a lot of guys who aren't doing that these days. A lot of teams they're building their teams off of speed and skill. And even fourth line guys, a lot of them are really talented players, going forward, who can fit into like these type of roles, and how many guys do you think you need like that?
Well, yeah, no, I love the style of player of Tom Wilson. Like, I know I just said I didn't like what he did a few nights ago.
Sure.
I would take him on my team any day, and he's a player I really enjoy watching because he does have that offensive upside, and you can play him with Ovechkin, and you can put him on the power play, and he can kind of just do a bit of anything.
Right.
I just get annoyed when he crosses that line from physical to dirty and goes after star players like that. I just think that that's something that you don't need to do, and there is kind of that code in the NHL, like, hey, you stick to your own weight class. You don't have to go after the skill guys. So that's what bothers me about him. But the player himself is awesome. I really love watching him. You can make a case he might be on Team Canada when Team Canada plays for the Olympics. There's a lot of people making that case now for a guy like Tom Wilson to be there. I don't know if I necessarily would put him on my roster, but the fact he's even in the conversation, I think, says a lot about his talent and about the skill level that he does have. So I think there really isn't too many comparisons for him. He's kind of such a unique player right now. So I don't think that teams can just go out there and find a Tom Wilson. So they're rare. It's kind of a diamond in the rough type scenario where there might only be 3 or 4 of these guys available. So I don't think you could necessarily load your roster with them. But if you find one, I think you want to hang on to it because he makes the Caps successful, whether you love him or hate him.
I think Shaw was kind of like him, Andrew Shaw, when he first started.
Yeah.
I think he kind of made stupid penalties and it just drove you nuts, but he had talent and he had the best no goal call of all time.
The head going off the helmet.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite plays ever. Like it's the fact that goal didn't count. I know in the rule book it's not. We need to make that count. I mean, that should be worth 2 goals.
Awesome.
That's insane. The skill.
That was
the header
perfect.
Goal. Yeah.
All right, I have to ask, hopefully my two cohorts here will entertain me. So I've always been, since I was a kid, Jake, I've been like a closet Maple Leafs fan. That's like been my other team. I've never been to Toronto. Yeah. Matt knows since second grade or third grade, I've been making him trade me all his Maple Leaf cards.
Only kid I've ever known in Chicago to wear a Maple Leafs jersey.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's cool, man. Whatever you gotta do.
Half the kids I don't think knew what the Maple Leafs were, but that's neither here nor there. So, okay, my question for you is, first of all, how, if the standings hold true and you have a first round of Toronto and Montreal, I've never been to Toronto. I'm still trying to convince my wife that we need to take a vacation to the Hockey Hall of Fame up there someday. But first of all, how crazy will the city go if it's a Toronto Montreal first round matchup? And what do you see them doing? Obviously, Anderson's working his way back. He had a rough night, I think, the other night in his first stint, I think in the AHL, right? Or in his conditioning stint.
Yeah, he's rusty. Yeah.
What do you see? I mean, do you see them? This is like the typical Leafs team where they fan out in the playoffs, or someone comes along and knocks them out really quickly, or what do you see with them doing in the playoffs?
Yeah, well, first of all, you got to get yourself to Toronto once it's safe to do so again, and we'll meet up. We'll get some good Canadian beer.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I've been to the Hockey Hall of Fame more times than I can count, so it's not.
It's in the mall, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I was there. It's pretty cool.
It's a fun vibe. Actually, it's funny too. When the Raptors won the NBA championship a couple years ago, that's basically where we were partying. The streets were just flooded with people. And I remember we were all walking past the Hockey Hall of Fame, and that was a surreal night. I mean, that was probably the most fun. I've lived in Toronto now for about 10 years. Ever since I got out of high school, I basically just moved here, and that was probably the most fun night I've ever had. I think if the Leafs won, it would be scary what would happen to the city. Like, it would just be, and we're still in a pandemic right now. I would hope by the time that the Stanley Cup playoffs are over and the Leafs would possibly win, that things are better. But I don't think people would really care. I think the streets would just be flooded with people. We might have another outbreak. So it might be best that they don't win this year. But I think a Leafs Habs first round series, which is what it's looking like right now, unless the Habs are able to catch Winnipeg for that 3 spot. I think it would just be great for both fan bases. I mean, I grew up in an era in an area where it's all Leafs fans and it's all Habs fans, and you would think where I grew up it was mostly Leafs fans, but I grew up in small town Ontario. A lot of people don't like the Leafs in small town Ontario. There's kind of like a dislike for the city in a way. So a lot of people cheer for the Habs. Some people cheer for teams like Chicago or other Original Six teams. Sure. So it was where I grew up, at least in the town I grew up, it wasn't mostly Leaf fans. It was kind of 50-50. Okay. And a lot of Habs fans. So big rivalries between a lot of friend groups. And I think it would be a lot of fun. I think when you look at the two teams on paper, I mean, talent-wise, the Leafs just blow them out of the water. Sure. But anything can happen in a series. As you guys know, watching playoffs over the years, like I've been watching the Leafs and Habs games all season. It feels like they've played 100 times now, and the Leafs just look like the better team every time. But you kind of get that feeling that game one of the playoffs, a couple bad things go their way. All of a sudden, the Habs are up 1-0 in the series, and the pressure gets cranked up, and things can change very, very quickly come playoff time. So it's tough to trust them in the playoffs. It really is, because there's been so many years where they get bounced. I do think that this is the best team they've had, maybe in my life, maybe ever since I was like 12, 13 years old. So it's been a while since they've had a team this talented, with a great path, I think, to go to at least the third round through that Canadian division. So they got to be able to take advantage of it. This is certainly an opportunity for them right now. But you do get the feeling that things aren't going to go their way come playoff time, because that's what usually happens here.
It's always in the back of my head.
They're not running into the Bruins.
Well, exactly. That's the other thing.
Yet.
That's the other thing. No, I'm right there with you. Like I still remember, and Matt can attest to this, I was playing like NHL 94 on Sega Genesis, and it was like, all right, I got, Felix the Cat and Doug Gilmour and Wendell Clark.
Matt Sundin.
And especially for all those years in the early 2000s when the Hawks were absolute garbage, it was always nice to have this other team to cheer for. So, well, that's exciting. I mean, if the Hawks aren't going to make it, I hope they can pull through. We'll see.
It's funny that you bring that up, though, because, as someone that grew up going to Leaf games and grew up in this area, my dad's like the biggest Leafs fan ever. Like, just a crazy diehard Leafs fan. And, you sort of grow up cheering for the team and rooting for them, whatever. but I always had a Western Conference team, and it was the Chicago Blackhawks.
There you
go. So it's kind of funny that it works out that way. I just always love the logo. Like, it's my favorite logo in professional sports. Great jersey.
Awesome.
So I was always attracted to it as a kid. Even when they didn't have great teams growing up, I still just like loved to see the jersey. And then as they actually became good, they got players like Kane and Taves on the team. I thought, man, this is a team I can really get behind. So that 2010 run, I was probably the biggest Blackhawks fan in our area, just really rooting them on, wanting to see them get it done. A family friend of mine is Dave Boland as well, so was really happy for him when he got the cup. So, and scored that huge goal. So it's
my gosh.
I've been rooting for your Blackhawks secretly for a long time.
What was your favorite cup winning year? Was it 2010?
Yeah, I would say 2010, just because that was the first one, and we had that Patrick Kane goal that nobody really saw. Did you guys see it go in? Like, what was the celebration for you guys?
Not off the bat, no.
No,
I was at my father-in-law's. We all we were like, "What's going on? What's going on?" We were like, "We'll sit back down. We'll sit back down." And then Kane starts going crazy.
You knew it.
So we're like, "Okay, let's hug," And then they finally said it was in, and we flipped out. It was amazing.
I jumped up. I said I was in a room full of non-hockey fans, and I jumped up. I jumped up and I said they won. They're like, what? I'm like, they won. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you didn't see it? That was clear as day. It went right through the freaking goalie, man.
5-0 on Leighton.
Michael Leighton.
I went to the refrigerator. I popped open the beer and I fucking slammed it right back. And then I was in tears. I couldn't freaking believe it, man. And then they showed it go through in the replay.
What was the celebration like there? Like, did you guys just flood the streets? What was that night like? I can't remember what day of the week it was, but
you know what? There was a storm because my parents lost power, and
really?
They were texting. Wait,
what's going on? I think no. That was 2015, I think.
2010.
Oh no. Was it 2013?
No, it was 2010.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't 2010.
Too many cups to count there, guys.
It was. I know, right? It was not 2010.
Well, my parents didn't have power. It must have been the air conditioners going off too long, because I was getting texts from my dad. What's going on? What's going on? He lost his mind.
Against Philadelphia?
Yes.
I don't
have any power issues.
Obviously in Toronto.
In 2013, I did. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, Jake, like in Toronto, it's hockey crazy all the time, right? So like, I know for us, like, Matt and I, and when I was in college, we would go to the United Center. You could get 300 level seats for $8 if you showed a college ID.
With an ID.
With an ID. There was no one there. They would turn, lights off in sections that there were no fans in. And then over the course of 2 years, all of a sudden, this bandwagon of fans just jumped on board. And I will admit, I think all of us at one point were very
angry.
We were angry. That's like, hey, you guys don't understand. Like, they were good in the 90s, but we've been suffering through this team for decades, and now you're just along for the ride.
Jerseys.
Name somebody besides Taves and Kane, or something like that. But I just remember that first 2010. My girlfriend at the time, we decided, all right, we're going to go down to the parade, the rally downtown, and we got to the train station at Midway Airport. In the line, it was so far back, you couldn't get in the train station. And that was at like 7 a.m. So. That it was crazy how much the city loved that team, and I'm hoping as they have these growing pains right now and they start to turn it around, I'm hoping a lot of those people who they've come on board, I hope they don't jump off at the first sign of trouble, but we'll see,
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I talked about the fact that Raptors won a couple years ago, and I'm a huge Raptors fan. Like, they're maybe not as popular, or they're definitely not as popular as the Maple Leafs or even the Blue Jays, who had a couple of really good runs here as well. But they were a team that I cheered for ever since they came into the league in the mid-90s, and they were just terrible. I mean, they would never even sniff the playoffs for years. So many years of pain, and I thought, are they even going to ever make the playoffs? And then when they went on the run and they won it all, the bandwagon just filled up. I mean, there was people, and I felt the same way. I thought, hey, I've been through all this pain. You guys are just jumping on at the best time. But ultimately, it was just fun to celebrate with everybody.
Totally.
It didn't really matter if you were the biggest Raptors fan or you just were jumping on at that time. So it's a special feeling, though. I mean, that was the first time I've ever experienced it as a fan of a team. And so for you guys to go through that, I know exactly what you mean. And it was pretty cool.
There was a time the Red Wings fans would outnumber us.
The Hawks fans, yeah.
And I'm not kidding. The Red Wings scored a goal. The goal horn went off, and I'm like, "What?
Was on an accident.
We're in Chicago here, boys." I could not believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was more fights in the stands when the Red Wings and Hawks would play. Even when the Hawks were bad, it got a little dicey at times.
Oh,
but,
it did.
Yeah.
I remember I think I was 13. My uncle took me to a game, and I was upset. I'm like, hey man, I've been wanting to go to a game for so long. He goes, this isn't the place for kids. And sure enough, man, we're up in the upper deck. We're watching the game. The first period, there's this group next to us. These two chicks, and these two dudes. And then everybody's drinking. And then by the third period, like 4 people got into a fight, the chicks included. I was like, holy smoke. I've never seen anything like this. It was just a heck of an experience, and watching the Hawks, go from, losing Jeremy Roenick and Ed Balfour and Chelios to
no home games on TV for the longest time.
No home
cried
games
when
on
Balfour
TV.
was traded.
Tony Imani's gone.
I freaking cried.
To watching them win the cup, it was just absolutely incredible. Have you ever made it to a Stanley Cup game? Just period.
No, I haven't actually, which is unfortunate because it would be quite the experience. But there hasn't been a Stanley Cup game here in my lifetime. So I've been to a ton of playoff games, though, a ton of Leafs playoff games, just never a Stanley Cup final game. A lot of the guys from the station have been able to make the trip. I, for years, was usually the one stuck back at the studio doing the night shows and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So some of my best memories actually of Cup finals are being at the studio, doing those night shows, and taking calls from fans, like Chicago fans going nuts after a win, or Kings fans when they had their run and things like that. So those are great memories for me, because you could really hear the passion of the fans and people having a good time. And even though I wasn't out there, you kind of get that energy, right. And you want to put on a good show. So I do kind of miss doing those night shows. You want off the night shift, and then once you're off of it, you think, hey, that was kind of fun. I liked I like doing those night shows.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Caps.
You definitely get to see everything, Well, cool, guys. Do you guys have anything more for Jake?
I got one more Leafs question, actually. I'm stealing it from Just Maybe. Who do you think is better, Marner or Matthews? Who would you take?
Oh, we've had this discussion before.
We have, and
Are you guys split on this? Or is this
I think we're Marner guys.
Yeah,
I think we're Team Marner for the most part.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Matthews here. I'll take the other side. Obviously, they're both really talented players, and they do different things very, very well. But ultimately, scoring goals is the biggest thing you need to do when you play hockey. Right. I mean, and it's not easy to do. I mean, we saw Ovechkin as maybe the greatest goal scorer of this era, or definitely the greatest goal scorer of this era, maybe the greatest goal scorer of all time. Have that sort of consistency of scoring 50 goals every single year, and it's just so difficult to do. You see players flash and have a 30-goal season or a 40-goal season, but to be able to do it every year is just so difficult. And Austin Matthews, to me, looks like somebody that can do it, like Alex Ovechkin did, and be a 50-goal scorer every single season. I really do believe he has that sort of goal-scoring ability. So I got to go with Matthews, just because I think that at any 82-game season, he can go out there and score 50. If you prorate this season, he's over 60. So it's crazy, the goal scoring ability, but that's not to take anything away from Mitch Marner, who's a fantastic player with great vision. But I'm going to go with Austin Matthews here.
So the Americans are going with the Canadian kid, and the Canadians going with the American kid from Arizona.
Well, speaking of Americans and Canadians, though, I'm not sure if the NHL is going to be going to the Olympics or not. I really hope that they do. I love Olympic hockey, but the American team could be really, really fun. Yeah. I mean, the Canadian team's always loaded, and you're going to have McDavid and McKinnon and guys like that. I mean, up and down the Canadian roster could just be crazy.
Scary.
But I'd be really excited to watch that American team with guys like Eichel and Matthews on there, not to mention some of the kids on the back end as well. So I hope they go. I hope they go. Maybe we can come back on and talk some Olympics.
And our guys don't get hurt.
I'd like to see Tom Wilson make the Canadian team, and both Tkachuk brothers with practically seething on their bench, waiting to get after him.
Yes, I think Brady might be the better Tkachuk.
Yeah, man.
I want to throw that out there. I mean, they're both good, but I really like Brady. I mean, he's
exciting to watch.
He is.
Yeah.
That's all they got in Ottawa. It seems
I was going to say, he makes
positive.
The Senators sometimes exciting to watch, seeing him out there. Jake, one last question, at least for me, before I know we got to let you go. But do you have any major playoff predictions? Anything in particular, series that you're looking forward to? Who do you think is going to come out of the East and the West in general? Anything you just like to elaborate about the playoffs?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for the playoffs because, like I said, the regular season, especially watching the same teams every single night, and I feel like this year we sort of knew who the good teams were and who the bad teams were very quickly, so I've been kind of waiting for the playoffs now for a while. The Canes were my cup pick at the start of the year, so I'm just going to stick with them. They've done nothing to show me that I need to jump off of them. If anything, they've proven to me that the one question mark I had about the Canes was their goaltending situation, and they've answered that. I mean, now they have too many goaltenders. They've got Mrazek, they've got Nedeljkovic, they've got Reimer. So I really think the Canes are set up for success going into the playoffs this year. So I'm going to stick with them. I'm really excited for the possibility of a Tampa Bay Florida matchup to kind of get that state of Florida rivalry going. And I think the entire East, all four of those teams, however you match them up, Caps, Pens, Isles, Bruins, those are going to be really, really good matchups. And I actually think the Isles could be the sneaky team that maybe some people are forgetting about in that mix. I feel like they're built for playoff success, built to match up against teams come playoff time. And here in Canada, I mean, just to see the Canadian matchups, the TV ratings are going to be insane here for, a possible Toronto-Montreal first round, Edmonton-Winnipeg in the first round, and then the possibility of Edmonton-Toronto in the second round to have McDavid versus Matthews. I mean, it's going to get a lot of eyeballs here in Canada, and I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be fun, and Canadian teams in general haven't had a ton of success in the playoffs, winning Stanley Cups. So the fact that you're going to get one of them at least into the third round, I think will be good for hockey here, and maybe keep people invested a little bit longer.
For sure.
I hope it's Toronto. I hope they can.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed,
dude. If McDavid has anything to say about it, man. Ooh. I mean, this could be his year. You never know.
I think Edmonton's issues are goaltending, though.
It is.
I mean, even the Hawks beat them last year, and they were definitely the better team.
Well, the Hawks. If thinking back, the Hawks looked like a more complete team than Edmonton. It seemed like it was Edmonton and Leon Draisaitl versus an entire other team.
Connor,
and they just couldn't put it together.
Yeah.
The Oilers are playing as we speak. I'm just going to assume McDavid has another 2 or 3 points.
2 or 3 points. Yeah.
Can you imagine if he played 82 games? Where do you think he would be right now? Like 160 points?
Actually, that's funny. That's funny you mentioned that. I checked today, and they said if you prorated the season as of right now, Patrick Kane would be if there's a top 10, at the bottom of the list with 109 points.
Wow.
That's insane.
So scoring's up.
Yeah, remember when Jamie Benn won the scoring title a few years ago with 80 points? Times
have changed.
Man, that's funny.
Yeah.
So, in closing, Jake, we'd really like to extend to you, man, how grateful we are for you coming on and talking hockey with you. You didn't disappoint, man, at all. It was really a great time. Talking hockey is pretty much the reason why we did this. And in Chicago, obviously from the Cup wins, there's a lot of Hawks fans that come out, and you go to talk hockey with people and they have no idea what you're talking about, and that's one thing that we love to do, man, is talk hockey, man. It's been a great time with you. We'd love to have you back on sometime. Maybe after the playoffs are over and see how things kind of pan out. We could, revisit what happened with Matthews. Did McDavid fly off?
Hoist in the cup.
Yeah. And you could see Justin cry after Toronto wins.
Yes, I'll record myself. That can be like some high level subscriber stuff,
Yeah, well, no, it was a blast talking hockey with you guys. You guys seem like really great people. So anytime, shoot me a note. I'm happy to come back on and enjoy the playoffs. Go Leafs for Justin and whatever. Matt, Michael, I don't know which team you guys are going to be rooting for, but
I don't know. I don't know yet. I like Vegas. I was in Minnesota 2 days ago, and I was watching them they break out the puck in 2 seconds, and seems like they just seem so stacked. But who knows, if they run into St. Louis, it could change, because they're battle tested. So we will see. I'm such a big Hawks fan, man. I see red any team that they play. They've played every team. So when I see everybody else playing with each other, I want everybody to lose. He's a homer.
But I don't have any hate against Toronto. But it's going to be interesting, man. I'm probably going to watch a lot of playoff hockey this year because with everything that's going on, I think it's going to be a really interesting year to see how this plays out. I really love the scheduling that they had this year of having you played a team twice you kind of, you spend 4 days there, you're rested up, you get guys, playing at their best, and guys are sick of playing each other, and it's going to be a really interesting come playoff time. So I think it's going to be great, man.
Awesome. Good stuff.
That's all that we've got for you tonight, guys. It's good. This was a great show. I had a really great time with it. Jake, thanks for coming on, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. This is a Tomahawk, and we're out.